Cool. So it is June 18th, and this is the groups and projects, Simplify Groups and Projects Working Group. So yeah, we can jump right in, filling out the agenda in real time. So Alex, let's put you in the spot, but I don't know if you want to jump in right away.
Sure. Yeah, no, I haven't had a lot of time this week to look into it, but Marcus is away this week, but the knowledge team is currently moving the wiki from projects into groups, and they've gone quite a way into that process. So I'll chat with Marcus next week about how he actually implemented that, went through that sort of process and sort of the mechanics of his actions, and I'll see if there's some sort of generalizations we can take out of that. But he's part of this working group, but he's away this week.
Is it worth, on that note, is it worth looking at similar, you should probably already have, but similar efforts in the past? I think from last week you mentioned that it seems like a lot of code was just duplicated as teams opted to move features from the project level to the group level.
Yeah, it's definitely worth starting to go through the code and looking for those sort of duplications. I have looked just at a very high level, looking for file names that are kind of replicated across, project and group hierarchies, and there's quite a few there. Yeah, but I haven't gone through them in detail.
Okay, great. Gabe.
Hey. Yeah, so I linked in this. I don't think I've shown this yet. I know Alex commented on it, and I won't share my screen, but you can kind of just jump in. I think this is where, Melissa, since you're here, I think you created this issue originally to explore using groups for teams. And I want to just kind of show like how this could work. And also highlight why we should be thinking about this as well. So we're about to release iterations into GitLab as a planning feature, and we put it at the group level for now because it makes the most sense. It'll have the biggest reach, I guess, even though it's like some folks would want it at the project level. But all that to say is, my team has issues, and there's no way to view a just my team's issues in the iteration report because it's at the group level, and we could add filters and a bunch of other hacky things to solve for that. But this is where if we had a separate hierarchy that was just teams, and then you could assign an issue that was created in one group or one project to a sibling group or project, then that issue would also show up there. You could more or less decouple all of these problems just by letting people form a group and then have issues or whatever work items assigned to that group that would show up within that group as well. So I think from a permission standpoint, I would love to see us take this into consideration technically. Is there any thoughts or feedback about that?
Is that, Melissa, is that related to our thoughts around multiple groups and splitting the hierarchy?
Yeah, it's a kind of, that's how we would get to something like that in my mind, right? Where right now it's sort of all mixed together, right? Like all of the different, I call them applications of groups, but it sounds like, Gabe, you're kind of going back to the conversation of hey, we rethought what groups were, right, and how they were used. For plans specifically, it would make things a lot more simple for you if they were kind of one and together, right? Projects and groups, right? Because now that kind of distinction is making your implementation of iterations complicated. Am I reading that correctly?
It's not just iterations. I think that's one thing. It's everything, right? Because you could have a team where they manage a bunch of microservices, and so they have a bunch of projects under their group that are each service, but they want to do issue tracking or issue management, project management at the group level. And the only way to do that now is if you create a project that holds the issues, and then you still do everything at the group level. And it's like it's a weird experience. So yeah, this would be sort of like if we were to merge the two things together, which I think makes the most sense. Then after they're merged, you also look at now how can I assign an object from one group to a sibling group, and it also show up within that group. So sort of like how you can share a group with another group, or a group or project with another group, and then they have permissions. It's a similar type thing. Like if it's shared, then you can assign that issue, and it would show up in both the workspace or container that was created, as well as the one that is currently assigned to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's sort of like what I've seen some old issues around, like assigning issues to groups, right, to teams, right? So in this case, it would be like two teams are working on that issue, right, essentially, and it would just show up both places.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like if we double down on groups being teams, right, and then expanded that application into other areas like issues.
Sure. Yeah. So I think like if you merge groups and projects together in one thing, they're sort of like they can be whatever you want them to be. They can be a team, right? They can be a repo. They can be a wiki, and only that, they could be just a design management workspace. So I think that's kind of where, instead of like if you have all of the resources available within one container, then you give the end user the ability to customize that workspace for what jobs they wanted to solve, whether that's managing issues as a team or doing any other things that you could do. So it provides a lot more flexibility in that, from that standpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah, let me show you guys something. I was playing around with Azure DevOps for something else. I'll put a screenshot here. But they actually, that's what they do. There's like a toggle setting thing where you basically turn features on and off. But for them, actually, teams are a whole separate thing. But that's within a project, like everything's projects, right? And within a project, you just go through and toggle things on and off. So there's no like separation. Everything is just like that. It's just all nested.
Yeah, I mean, we could eventually create separate teams, but they're sort of like, if we go down the road of where we're going with this working group, you would have a collection of people that are already inside of this group, right? And maybe you just toggle something on to say like, this is a team, right?
Yeah,
Instead
exactly. Just like this, except one of the toggles is like team.
Yeah, because I think it would give you the ability to pretty much do whatever you want to do from the end user experience. That's kind of like where I like the fact that we could maybe implement this on the back end and merge the two together without really changing anything in the end user experience, because it gives the most flexibility then for product UX to go and be like, okay, what's the best user experience we can create, knowing that we have this underlying extensible thing that can solve all of these different jobs, right? So anyway, thanks for sharing that. That's good. I think Jira Next Gen has something similar too with those toggles. So,
hey, Gabe, just going back to what you were saying previously, you mentioned, it sort of sounded like you wanted a feature that could sort of be pushed back up into another group. So not just necessarily maybe two groups sort of coming together, sort of sharing one group into another group, but actually kind of sharing like, I don't know, like an epic from one group into another group. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, it's basically like if you have work items that are worked on across two groups, and just how do we do that? Sharing is one way, right? But maybe there's other ways of basically sharing your resources across group.
Okay,
right.
yeah.
So one way that we've sort of discussed where we've said that there'd be two groups and one group maybe owns this what was it, a work item?
Issue, just say issue, whatever.
Issue, okay. And then you share one group into that group that owns the issue. but then if I hear you correctly, you're saying that issue then kind of gets kind of owned as well by that other group. So you're kind of like conceptually pushing this issue from this group back into this group. So, you know, in terms of like, if you're looking at some kind of, I don't know, roll up metrics or kind of some higher level view of this group here, then you get some access to that issue. Is that correct? It seems like it's a subtle.
Yeah, we'd have to figure that out. The way that I was envisioning is like, if you look in issue or merge request or Epic, you know, Epics don't have assignees, but you have assignees and you can assign people to an issue, right? And it would be similar to where you would have a team field or a group field or whatever thing, and you basically select which group you want to assign it to. So if you assign it to that group, it will live where it was created in that list, and it will also show up where within the group where that is. And you might want to say, let's maybe do consider rolling that up and making that available up top, or maybe not. But I think the value from a reporting standpoint is, even though it was created here, it was completed by the team over here. So if we were going to give some sort of like tracking to say who completed what, that's where you could have like a team roll up. We'd have to solve for that, but yeah, that's more or less what some folks want, largely in bigger companies, because you'll have the engineers or the IT team that's working closer to the repos, and they want to be close to their issues. And then you might have like your planning team that's over here, and maybe they want to look at issues across lots of different projects and like plan things holistically. And so this is actually, we lost a really big opportunity because we didn't support this, because they basically said, well, how can I see all the issues that are in these projects over here when my team is in this sibling group over here, right? And just the things that I care about, or this team cares about, from these 20 projects that are in this other group hierarchy. So I don't know the best way to solve it, but that's the basic problem.
Okay, so from your perspective, if a group can be shared into another group that owns these things, does that sound like that would solve that problem for you?
Yeah, but you wouldn't want to share all of the resources. You want to make it so that they could be assigned, right? Because like take us for an example. Like, let's say we want to have a managed group and a plan group, right? And then we have our GitLab.org group or project over here, and it's like they're kind of siblings. And I want to assign just the issues that have the group project management label to the plan group, and I don't want to see everything else because it's not my work, right? I think would be the angle.
Yeah, this is fairly common too for teams like in large enterprises that have like platform services and things like that, right? Where it's like by design, one team won't own the full scope, right? Like there will be other teams that work on the whole deliverable. And people need to have views into like the whole thing together.
So if we had one group that sort of owns an issue, but it's not like a group member group, it's just like a collection of resources, and then you have a whole bunch of other groups which are like teams, so they're collections of people, and then they're shared into this kind of resource group thing, and those teams are made as like owners to that resource group. Maybe that can work, but if you need to divide, like, well, these people own the issues, but these people own the wiki, we probably can't do that at the moment. That probably gets way more complicated. Is that where you're at?
Yeah, I was thinking, instead of like shared into, you could have access to the resources, right? So like right now we can do that, where I can share one group with another group, which means I can then click into this other group to see the things there, right? But in order to see the resources there, I have to move from group A into group B. And so I think what we want to figure out how to do is, if I work in group A, how can I have an issue that I have access to in group B show up in group A? But just the ones that are that group A needs to take care of, or like should be assigned to complete. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so like to put an example, right? Like let's say in an org, right, there's like a billing team, right? And they do everything billing. And Gabe's team is creating a feature that requires changes to the billing team, to the billing system, right? So his team is taking care of like the feature work, as I'll call it, right? So like all the moving parts to bring it to life. And there's one issue, right, that's about billing. So he wants to assign it to the billing team and have it show up in their backlog without it, but still have it so that he can see it in the context of that deliverable. So I actually think
Sorry if this is complicated,
No,
but this is
no.
like the heart of the problem that I think
Yeah.
we're I don't know the best way to solve it, and I'm open to that, but like the heart of what we're trying to solve, basically.
I
have like
think probably controversial, but actually I think all of this becomes much easier if like groups of people are different from groups of resources, because then you're not mixing like two. I feel like it gets more complicated where it's like, well, but a group is a collection of resources, or a group is a collection of teams. Like if we just said we have this thing that's a collection of people, right? And that's what you assign to an issue in this teams field or whatever, then I feel like it's a lot easier to explain.
You could do that. It would be the same thing though as if we were to merge the two together and you just have a different front end, right?
Yeah.
Like that's.
But
I guess
conceptually, it's like a separate thing.
Yeah, like, and that's where we could use the underlying container workspace type thing and have like a team and build a whole team's feature on top of it, right? That is just has a bunch of stuff disabled for it. Like I don't know the best way to go forward with this, but you would still need to solve the problem of there's a issue that lives in this resource group and it should show up there, and then you have a team group that you would want to see that issue in because a team is assigned to it.
Mm-hmm.
But would you treat the resources, currently we kind of group resources by these sort of group levels, and would you group the resources? You know, like the wikis and the snippets and the issues and epics, whatever, they all sort of belong to a group at the moment. So do we, I think we can do what you're saying, Gabe, but, and like you say, we can do it through the UX where we kind of just, we use the backend infrastructure, but then we tap into a finer grain. So maybe snippets, we create a group, and then wiki, we create a group, and it's all a bit behind the scenes. It's not the nicest thing, but we could probably do it. Is that what you're saying, where you could kind of, it kind of feels like this, like you said before, the decoupling issue of decoupling people from resources and the group hierarchy and so on, but also like this decoupling of ownership, that it's not just a group that can own something, or it's a user that can own something. There's like this sort of, an issue could belong to many different things, or an epic could belong to many different things. It sort of feels like maybe a slightly different concept to what we've discussed previously.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's like right now it's like your location is kind of what derives who owns it, right? But we're talking about having something else define who owns an issue.
Well, I think you could say the canonical place where it was created owns it, right? So you would never, it's not like you're moving the issue. Like if I create an issue in Project A will always own it under the hood. You can just assign it more or less to another group where it would show up there. And I think there's certain things that you wouldn't do that with. Like, I don't think you would assign a wiki, right? There's nothing that like.
Right, but what if you wanted to move the wiki to another group, and the wiki is, because it's part of a group, it also sort of comes with all this baggage of like these issues and this repository and so on and so on. Like you can't, can you take the wiki and then like just move it to another group and leave everything else in that group? Because you kind of have to move the whole group through the hierarchy. You can't just take the wiki.
Maybe.
So
I don't know.
Would someone want to do that though? I guess that's the. with issues, I am very clear on the use case, but is there anything else that somebody would want to do this kind of like joint ownership thing?
Epics, maybe epics.
Yeah.
Merge requests, incidents. I think that's where we were working on this idea of having like similar to what we're doing with groups and projects, but with issuables themselves, and making it so issuables can be a little bit more extensible to support like incidents more properly and things like that. So there's opportunity to change some behavior there. But I would also say like we don't have to do this solution if there's a better one or a better way to solve it, or not using groups. I more or less was pushing to merge the two together because it seemed like the smallest primitive we could reuse to accomplish lots of things. But please, like if there's a better way to solve the product needs, I'm 100% supportive of that.
Coming from this from like an outside perspective, since Mike kind of added me second at the last minute, but is there any reason why like this can't be done like graphically or as like a flow chart? Like I want to connect these two objects and I'll just draw a link to them, or maybe draw multiple objects and connect these. And these objects are groups or wikis or issues, and then you just organize them categorically like this. Obviously it's not an MVC, but functionally it sounds like what you're trying to do is organize these containers or these objects.
Yeah, there's organizing, and then there's also providing the ability for teams to organize things that or other or users to organize their resources and their people in an extensible way that can't be done within GitLab right now.
So
Right.
maybe what we need to do is just like do some really rough like mock-ups or like activity charts of the things that we want people to do, right? And then that's what we talk about next week, right? Of just like, hey, this is what we would want to do, right? This is how we would want it to work, and sort of like leave behind. I don't know if that exists already, Gabe, but like leave behind what we can do today, and that's how we can figure out like how we do it.
Yeah, I can share this again. This is from the opportunity canvas that's linked in the top of the document, and it's worth reading through just if you haven't yet. This is the problem validation we did for this. But like today, this is what it is. Like if for a team that wants to practice safe, not everyone does. I don't want to have first class support for safe, but you'll get the point. Is like you have this group that holds some things. You have like a project within that portfolio group to hold issues, but then they're usually looked at from this group level. And like you have all these extra projects just to hold issues and other things that, you know, would be better if they could be done at the group level. And like, I think where we want to be able to like go is saying like, hey, you can have your top level group and you can have your value streams that you set up, and you can have any resource you want that lives within each of these workspaces, you know? So I think like that's where there's so much diversity in how teams structure and organize themselves that for us to say like you have to do it this way, like it's on the screen, would be wrong, because you might also have the case where you have this team one, that's all it is, and it has like a bunch of services underneath it, right? Or who knows what they are, but I kind of like at the end of the day, this is what we want to be able to sell. Because this is currently what we show.
Yeah,
really
so the part I get this, the part where I'm getting lost is the whole like sharing issues. Like I can't picture that in my mind. So maybe that's the part that I feel like could be more clear.
Yeah, I've been wondering if, as we've been discussing, if this is just like if all users exist at that top level. Gabe, show your thing again, the last screen.
Yeah.
Like if all users exist at that top level, so then they have permission to access and do things to all of the child entities below it. And then whatever your collection of resources are, like they're owned by their parent group, but that doesn't preclude the relating issues to other issues that are in different groups, or allowing users to do things to issues that, or see reporting of issues and things that are in groups that they don't normally work in. I don't know if that's like a more complicated, because then you're allowing users to access all the things, and you don't have as much like protection against resources. It's like if you don't want a certain group of people to access issues in one group or something like that, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of like how SSO works today. Accidentally, I would say. So like everyone gets added to the top group as guest if you have SSO enabled, and actually like customers don't like that very much because of what you said, right? Like there's people that just don't want people to have access to things outside of what they're supposed to be working on. But maybe there's like specific people that should for reporting purposes.
So yeah, I'll show this a little bit too, just to think about it. Like this is kind of how I was thinking about it. So if we have this namespace and there's an issue gets created here, and then it gets assigned to this namespace, it will still show up in this issue list, in XA's issue list, but it will also show up in the XBY issue list, right?
And
so I think this
you would want to have like multiple namespaces, right? Like up to N, I don't know, some reasonable limit.
You can nest 20 deep right now. So you can have groups and subgroups 20 levels deep at the current moment.
I mean, like assigned to an issue.
Oh, you can only have one. That's where I would do one.
But in the future, right, this that you're saying like assigned, you would only have one team assigned. It's just different from where it originated. Is that?
Yeah. So it wouldn't be one to many. It'd be like one issue can have one assignee, basically. Mm-hmm. And by default, it would be the group where it was created, right? Let's say like if I create an issue, it will automatically be assigned to the place where it's created. But then I could like assign it here, because this way, then like if I'm depending on somebody over here, I can be like, okay, your team needs to take care of this, but my project is dependent on it, or whatever it is. So that way, like it can be tracked in both places. Which I know it makes it more complicated, and maybe we should step back and like not do this because I want to simplify things. But
so theoretically, these would be under like an epic, right? Like these would be issues under an epic, something like that.
Yeah, but I've also gotten requests, or we've gotten requests to have assignees on epics. So, you know, like I would assume that eventually epics could be assigned as well.
And today, can you have child issues on an epic that are in a different group?
Not a sibling group, no. But you can have any issue that is both downstream in any subgroup or subproject.
We're about out of time. I'm wondering if it's still useful to maybe this is an ask for PMs, but to do what Melissa had suggested, where we try to, I don't know, culminate this a little bit more cleanly in a single diagram between now and next week, and then we can continue this discussion then. You think that's worthwhile? I guess Gabe and Melissa, we can collaborate on that asynchronously.
Yeah, would it be useful also just to maybe step back from it and write job stories or jobs to be done, like without looking at what the solution is, just saying what needs to happen, right? Because I want to give latitude to engineering to come up with the best way to solve it, if that makes sense, if this isn't it. So
yeah. Okay, I like that.
I will work on those things async. I'll create an issue under this epic just to track those things. And I'll do that after this call.
Okay, great. Thanks all. Have a good day.